When you think about hidradenitis suppurativa, it's not just the symptomology, it's also the mental health aspects that come with it. Those comorbidities come in very strong and they can derail us. They can derail us from accomplishing our goals, from dating, from being present in our relationships, our friendships.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Harmonious Wealth. I have a very special guest. We have Jasmine Espy on. Jasmine, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, of
Y-
course.
Yes, yes. So Jasmine Iyanna Espy is the CEO and founder of the Association of HS and Inflammatory Diseases, and she is a powerful advocate for the HS community. After her own diagnosis, Jasmine turned her experience into a mission to raise awareness and ensure no one else feels the isolation she once did. As a multimedia storyteller, she produced The Beacons, a documentary premiering at the Tribeca Film Festival, and she shared her story on global platforms, advocating for equity in healthcare. Her work has been featured in Essence, Ebony, and Healthline. Again, Jasmine, thank you so much for coming on today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Um, I was really excited about this podcast. I'm like, oh my God, I have a podcast episode. I was telling my partner, I'm like, look, your girl we're on the up and up.
And it's cute. We're both wearing blue. If you're watching on
Yes.
YouTube, we're both wearing blue. She has a gorgeous dress. I love how your dress complements your hair. Like, oh my goodness,
Thank
and the
you.
earrings, girl, killing
Thank
it. Okay.
you. I love fashion. I love jewelry. It makes me feel like me. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
anytime I can put it on, I will.
Okay. Yes, I love it. I love it. So first, I jacked up the pronunciation, and the editor probably has the HS. Can you please give us the proper pronunciation of your association?
Of course. So I'm the founder and CEO of the Association of Hidradenitis Suppurativa and Inflammatory Diseases, or OSID. So we say OSID because it is a mouthful. So
Mhm.
yes.
So what's interesting is just a little backstory. I
Mhm.
used to work at an urgent care, and I had a young lady come in, and she had HS, and
Mhm.
I didn't know much about the disease, right? And she was going through excruciating pain, and I
Okay.
felt so bad for her during that
Yeah.
time. And it looks like a lot of times women of color, especially Black women, are misdiagnosed. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about the disease and kind of like how you came across it or got diagnosed?
Yeah. Hidradenitis suppurativa is, it's something that has been gaining awareness, especially over the pandemic. There is speculation that it's been around since Karl Marx has been alive, because there was a physician who actually looked through his journals and he mentioned having carbuncles, and the way that he described his experience was very similar to HS. So this is just speculation, but it's a good indicator of how long HS has potentially been around, or even longer. So it's a condition that shows up on any place that there's a hair follicle in the body, which means you can
Mm,
get it anywhere. But it shows up as these abscesses and nodules on the skin. And essentially, what happens is these nodules or abscesses develop with a pus fluid, and it grows until it ruptures. And
mm,
sometimes it can create these tunnels and tracks, and where this pus continuously flows. Maybe not as much as it did before, but it definitely continues to drain. Oftentimes, the wounds are hard of healing, and when
mm,
they do heal, they'll create scar tissue. And at times, there will be other abscesses that form on top of that scar tissue, creating more and more wounds, more and more scar tissue, more and more tunnels. So you can have three different stages Hurley stage one, two, and three. But some people are moving away from using the Hurley stage system and are using mild, moderate, and severe. I
mm.
had severe HS since I was 13 years old,
Wow.
and I went through a very tough time dealing with that condition at that age. That was a time where a lot of kids, my peers, were experiencing what it was like to be a teenager, whether it was getting their period, dating, some people having sex for the first time,
Mm,
all these different things, even just being kids, exploring interests, doing hobbies. and I was cleaning pus off the floor. I was staying up all night because I had an abscess on my chest and I couldn't sleep. So there were things that I was experiencing that I didn't know how to articulate as a child, because how do you articulate something, what you're dealing with, what you're mentally going through as you're experiencing something like that at 13, you know?
Wow.
I already had issues with bullying in my body because I had already other pre-existing conditions. I was, a plus size girl, and I was darker. I was taller than a lot of my classmates, so I was bullied. I was
Mm,
different. And so, unfortunately, this caused a lot of disconnect with myself and my body. So, when you think about hidradenitis suppurativa, it's not just the symptomology, it's also the mental health aspects that come with it. Those comorbidities come in very strong, and they can derail us. They can derail us from accomplishing our goals, from dating, from being present in our relationships, our friendships, everyday life for ourselves. And I started out being very ashamed dealing with this condition, and
mm.
now I am very vocal. I scream it from the mountaintops that I have HS, and I have an organization where we're able to help other people who are going through the same issues that I did, or even things that are vastly different, but that's what HS is, and that's how it's affected me.
Oh, oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing because like you mentioned, like I can't imagine at 13, like all the different changes, especially
Yeah.
like with changing from like middle school to high school, that in itself. And then, like you said, your period of a few episodes ago, we talked about like periods and managing it. And when we
Yeah.
first get it into now managing it as an adult, right?
Hmm.
But then you having a chronic illness on top of that, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful that now you have a safe space and advocacy to help other people with their diagnosis and like just education, right? And helping them
Right.
understand how to go through and just live healthier lives.
Yeah.
So when did you start your nonprofit?
I started it, we got 501(c)(3) status in 2022, but I
Yay.
officially started it. Thank you. Very exciting. It was very exciting. Very
Yes,
difficult
yes,
thing to go
yes,
through. Yes, but you know what I mean? When you get there, you get there. um,
it's a process.
yes, it's a process. But we got it in 2022, and then 2020 is when we started our first community organization, our first group, or
Mm,
like, sorry, our first community event happened in 2020. Yeah. Mhm.
I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Mm. I want to go back to how you mentioned that, on top of the diagnosis,
Mhm.
you were experiencing a lot of, you felt othered towards your peers because of your body, as well as just the things that we go through in the Black community, being
Yeah.
dark skinned, being like different shaped. It's all the different things.
All of the things.
What was comforting for you, like at any of those times? What kept you
Yeah.
comforted?
Yeah. At first, it was difficult. It was hard to find
Mhm.
any comfort, and it was
Yeah.
very dark for me for a very long time.
Mm.
And luckily, there were some things that showed up in my life as a portal and entrance for me to explore and express
Mm.
myself when I couldn't. And I'm almost tearing up about it because I just feel like, I'm a spiritual person, so I just believe in the divine helping us. And I feel like, God really came in and provided me some refuge from the
Mm.
destruction and the darkness that I felt. And
Mm.
a lot of those things were in writing. I was a poet. I was a slam poet when I was a young child.
Mm.
And I wrote poetry, and I
Mm.
also did radio. So I had two radio shows with my high school. One was a Christian rap underground centered, because I've always been like a music head, but I've
Yeah.
been specific to like underground emerging artists. And so I did a lot of work with that. And then the other podcast, I forget what that one was about, but I had two different podcasts at
Yeah.
that time. And I wanted to be a radio producer. That's why I went to school, is to do
Really?
journalism. And so I wanted to do that work. but the industry was changing at that time, you know. But radio, poetry, and then at the time, I identified as Christian, so I was a part of a Christian club, and so these were the different aspects, the pillars that I'm learning now through therapy, that we have different pillars that help us through these difficult times. And so at that time, I had those pillars in my life to really hold me up, you know, when I was feeling awful and terrible about
Mm,
myself. I didn't have much of that in middle school when all that stuff really started. I
mhm,
was really trying to figure things out at that time. So that was the dark period. And I
mm,
was using some very unhealthy ways of coping.
mm.
But by like high school, college, I started to explore some things, and I started to express myself in ways that I hadn't before.
Hmm, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing.
of
And I
course.
do want to hold space, for you during those dark times. It's
Hmm.
really hard. We
Yeah,
feel alone. And of course, we can't imagine exactly what you felt, right? But just
right.
kind of holding space for you in those moments and
Yeah,
just saying, I'm so happy that you were able to find some solace and some
yeah.
support. And I pray that you did have support during that time, from family and friends. And but yeah, I love that you were able to kind of transition to where you are now.
Hmm.
And it's transferable. You wanted to be a journalist, and it's like you're an advocate for people who
Yeah,
have been through what you've been through.
yeah.
What started that journey in 2020? Like, what was that starting point to get you with that first community experience?
I love telling the story because, man, whew, I came from a place where I was severely depressed, severely
Mm,
like a suicide. You know, just trigger warning for anybody who might be in this state now, or might be triggering for them to hear this. But I had issues with suicidal ideation and depression
mm,
and social anxiety, all the things I was experiencing, and I was really looking for something to help me, to pull me out of darkness. And I
mm,
was desperate. I was very desperate, because I just said to myself, I was like, this can't be life. Life
right.
can't just be dark all the time. I'm like, this is
Mm,
just like, and I had experienced it for so long, but I wasn't like that as a kid. As a kid, I was
mm,
very vibrant, very, very much confident, go getter, knew what I wanted, told people what I wanted, got what I wanted, I was very confident. Like, let my parents tell it. They have
right.
stories. Okay. But as I experienced bullying, as I experienced integrating myself into community and learning, what it meant to be a child and what it meant to be a
Mm,
black little girl, life became difficult. It became hard because I didn't fit into a lot of the molds that
mm,
people were trying to set for me. I didn't look the way that people thought I should look. I didn't act the way that people thought I should act. I didn't think the way that people thought I should think. And so it caused for me, um, you know, discord and separation. And so a lot of my journey was figuring out what's next. What can I do? And because HS was such a huge thing that I was dealing with at the time, I was like, what can I do about this? Because I feel like this is the thing, this is the thorough line right now that is really causing a lot of hardship for me. And so I was a journalist, and I was working in with different publications in Detroit,
mhm,
mainly magazine, because I wanted to do feature writing, a lot of arts, entertainment, business, tech, music. I was very much involved in that kind of like community, like events and things. And
mhm,
so I was working for a magazine called Our Detroit Magazine, HOUR Detroit Magazine. I was an intern. And all of a sudden I got this download. And sometimes I get these downloads, and the way that it feels is like my sacral center will just like start buzzing. It's like, oh, you know what I mean? It's it's just like, it's kind of like just beams down. And so I got this download of telling my story, because at that time, I went through, like in college, when I was at I went to Western Michigan for college. And then I transferred to Wayne State University because I got a partial scholarship for journalism.
mhm.
That was more like a full ride, but
Okay.
it was a partial scholarship technically. And so I transferred to Wayne, and I had these requirements because I was in this scholarship program, to hold an internship in the Our Detroit magazine was part of that. But at Western, I was 350 pounds and I lost all this weight. So by this time I was like 213 or something like that pounds. So I had lost a significant amount of weight, over 100 pounds. And
Amazing.
um, I used veganism and changing my diet and exercising in order to do that. So I did it a very like quote unquote natural way. Um,
Mhm.
and I wanted to tell my story about how that helped me to get into remission for HS, because I
Mm.
started to like notice that some of the wounds, like the wounds under my chest, on my back, on my lower back, my side, healed with no medical intervention. Now other areas were still active, not as active as before, but they were still active. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to use this, my access to this publication, as a means to help build awareness about HS, tell my story, and start speaking up. And so I told my editor what my idea was, and she loved my idea. She was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And it was a feature piece. So
Mm.
a feature piece is more of like more storytelling. You have more life in the writing, and it's different than like news writing, which is very straight facts and sterile sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, and so I told my story, and it felt so good. I was like, "Oh, wow."
Mm.
And that was the first time. And I was like, wow, I want to do more of this. And at that time, the stuff we're doing now, as far as advocacy, traveling the world, talking about this, being on platforms, did not exist at all, because
Right.
social media did not exist in the way that it did now, back then. And
Yeah.
I sound old when I say that, but it's true. Well,
Right.
Instagram was literally just pictures. Like, you know what I
Exactly.
mean? So,
Like the old icon, the old school icon looked
yes.
like a little
Hmm.
old school
And you would
camera.
put the
Yep.
sepia on top of the picture.
Yes. Okay.
You thought you were
And
doing
you posted
something.
for fun. You
Things
didn't post to like get
get
things
brand
or like
deals. Yeah.
there's no link in bio. Like
There was no links in bios. We didn't know what
right.
that was. Okay. Um, it was a lot different back then than it is now. Okay. So
Mm.
um at that time, I just, I kind of prayed and I was like, okay, I want to do more of this. I don't know what that looks like. So I just kept meditating on it and whatnot. And I remember I was at lunch one time, while I was there at Hour, and I got another download to do like a documentary on Black women living with HS. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to accomplish that. I was like, I don't have any resources for creating a documentary. Like, I was like, but
Right,
okay,
right.
you know what I mean? And so I remember I was looking, because I felt like I hit a ceiling in my journalism career in Detroit. So I was looking for the next thing, and I found this program by the University of Southern California. And
Mm.
they essentially had a scholarship program with Sony, where Sony would pay for some of your school, for your
Okay.
master's degree. And so, long story short, I got the scholarship to go to USC for journalism, and I created a documentary on Black women living with HS. And I remember the power that I felt about what I was doing, because I had
Mhm.
told my story on Hour, but I hadn't told it in like significant detail. And doing this documentary was me telling my story in significant detail. And I was crying on the third floor of the USC Annenberg School of Journalism, on the phone with
Mhm.
my parents, breaking down, because I'm not a person who can necessarily like see into the future, like picture, like it's not a clear picture. It's more energy. It's like I feel the energy of what's coming towards me, and I'm scared. I'm frightened
Mhm.
because, first of all, it's good energy. It's not bad, but
Right,
it's
right, right.
different. It's something I
It's
haven't
unknown.
experienced before, and I have to access a different part of myself in order to cross over to that side. I have to enter into a portal, right? So it's like
Mhm.
we enter into a door. You might be in the same building, but a portal is a
Right.
whole new universe. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's like, okay, what am I gonna do? Like, I am I qualified to do this? Like, I can't. Like, there's so many things I was going through, right? But my parents, through that time, my parents really encouraged me. They were just like, go for it, because we think that this is going to be a breakthrough for you, for telling your story and just really being able to access something you haven't before. And, boy, were they right. I
Mhm.
could not have I could not have pictured everything that I've been able to do since that moment. And it really started from me telling that story at our Detroit magazine. That first feature article was the entrance, but the documentary is really what catapulted me onto the other side. Um, and so I did that documentary, and then, the world shut down because I graduated from school in 2019. And right then, the world had shut down because of COVID. And I was thinking about another thing that I could do to help impact the community. And I saw that there weren't a lot of,
Oh no.
there weren't any actually, um, there weren't any
Oh,
summits
the
that were
audio.
for
Okay.
patients living with HS.
I will say
Oh,
your audio went off like a few seconds. The
okay.
last
I'm
thing I
sorry.
heard was after you did the documentary, it, the world shut down. You graduated 2019, and
Okay.
that's when everything kind of shut down.
Okay. So yeah, I
Sorry.
graduated. No, it's okay. It's okay. I graduated in 2019 from USC. And I premiered my documentary on the Sony lot, which was amazing because I was an intern there as a result of the scholarship they gave me. So I was big pimping in the film
Right.
industry for a little bit. um,
I know that's right.
it was amazing. It was phenomenal. And after that, the world completely shut down because of COVID. And so I was trying to figure out what was the next thing because I wanted to do a documentary screening tour for the documentary I did. And I was in
Mm.
conversation to do that. But when COVID hit, they were like, yeah, we're not doing that. I was like, okay. I was like, all right, well, we'll revisit this another time. And so as I was sitting in my apartment, I was just like, I was twiddling my thumbs. I was getting more and more involved with the community online because there was like Facebook support groups. I was getting connected to nonprofits, because of the documentary, it was going around on the internet. And so I was getting connected to all these different people. And so more opportunities started coming my way. And so I noticed that there wasn't a summit for patients living with HS.
Mm.
There was like a summit, there was a symposium done by the HS Foundation for physicians. And so I was like, you know
Mm.
what? This would be a good opportunity to fill a gap because I was listening to the woman who created Tushy. She was talking about one of the ways that you build a business is by being a disruptor and filling gaps. And so when I was meditating on that, I was just like, what gap could I fill? What disruption can I create, in this community where there seems to be lots of resources, lots of nonprofit organization, lots of support groups. And so that's what came to me. And I was like, okay, we're going to run with it. Let's do it.
Mhm.
And so I used the connections I had. I because of the documentary I had a fiscal sponsor, and so technically, like my
Mm.
documentary sponsored the summit that I put together, and
Mm.
so I got donations through my fiscal sponsor. I think we got around $7,000, and then we got five
Mm.
sponsors. We had an event, one session a day. So it was like a week long event during HS Awareness Week. And we did that. It was a huge success. And we just kept doing it every single year. But it grew from just that community event to being a whole nonprofit because I had all these other ideas and I wanted to revisit doing the documentary again. I was like, oh, I don't want to just do a documentary screening tour. I want to recut the documentary because, it looked like a student film. So I was like, okay, I want this to look like a documentary now,
Mm.
so
Mhm.
as I started to have conversation, building relationship with pharmaceutical companies, foundations, and things like that, I was able to break into this space and really bring something fresh and new into the community, something that was needed. And that's how I got my start.
Oh my goodness. Divine timing. If
Look,
I've never heard it before, like what?
yes,
Oh my goodness, that is beautiful.
yes, God's hands have
And
been all over my life. Cannot deny
okay.
it. Cannot deny it.
I'm gonna show you how I see you exactly, right? So
Yeah.
that you can spread that light to the
Oh,
world and help
yes.
others. Oh my goodness.
Yes, you are
And
spitting.
and I was reading a devotional and it talks about like what if we reframed asking God what to do next, but just say, where do you want me? Like,
Yeah,
where do you need me next?
yeah.
And
Mhm.
you saying that, like, really drilled home,
Mhm.
you were exactly where God needed you next. It was just like, I'm just gonna trust it. It feels good. I feel the energy.
Right. I
I'm
feel it.
scared, God, but let me just do this.
Yeah. Yeah, because God was like, come on now. Come
Right?
on. Like I'm
Like,
trying to like you don't want it because at the time when I was in journalism when I was in school, I told my professor what I wanted to do because the documentary I got inspired by this woman named Jennifer Brea, who created a
mm,
documentary called Unrest, and she has ME, or CFS, I think is what it's called, chronic
okay.
fatigue syndrome. Chronic fatigue syndrome, excuse me, ran
Okay.
that together. CFS, and so she did a documentary and I watched that and it inspired the one that I'm doing, that I'm working on, that, by the grace of God is going to be out by next year.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
but when I was doing the documentary, my professor at the time, he was like, I don't see the, like, why would you do a documentary about a condition nobody knows about that you have? Like, why is that interesting? He was like, I have a heart condition. I'm not doing a documentary on that. And I'm just like, well, I'm doing what God told me to do. I didn't say it to him,
Listen,
but on the inside, I was like, number one, I'm doing what God told me to do. Number two, you're not paying my tuition. So I don't really care what you have to say. It's
right.
like-
And that's even more of a reason to do the documentary because people think like him,
Mhm.
right? So,
Exactly.
yeah.
But
Oh
but
my
at that
goodness.
time, I was like, I felt like God told me, He was like, in the next 10 years, you are going to want to be at the forefront of what's happening in this community. So I need you to do this documentary.
Mm.
And that's exactly what's happening now. So
Ooh.
I'm glad I followed what I felt like God told me to do. And I'm glad I had enough power on the inside of me to move forward and not let anybody else shake me. If there's anything that anyone can take from this conversation, is that if you feel something, you better do it. You better do it, and you
Seriously.
better not let nobody tell you anything different because you might miss out on a huge blessing and you don't want to miss out, babe.
Right, right. And we really just doing things for an audience of one.
Right,
An audience of one is God. Like we gotta shed all those things of what we think people think and
right,
what we think about ourselves if that's negative. It's like
right.
no. Mm-mm,
Mm-hmm.
mm-mm,
Yeah.
mm-mm. Oh my goodness. So with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And going through the process of like doing the summit every year, what was it like transitioning? Because you mentioned that you had so many ideas. Like, what was the process of like, okay, now I need to create a nonprofit? How was that process like for you to have it come to creation?
Hard. Um,
Yeah.
it was hard because I had a hard conversation with a mentor of mine that I actually met through an organization. Um, And she told me, she was like, Jasmine, if you want to have a stake in this community, you need to change the name of your nonprofit so that it can align with the communities that you serve. Because it was called My Gold Lining Inc. at the time. And it was like, that
Okay.
doesn't have any, that sounds like a production company. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like a nonprofit for HS, right? And so she was like, I need you to change the name and I need you to really define your mission and what you want to do and your vision about this organization. And she was like, when you do that, I think that the floodgates are going to open. You're going to get sponsors out the wazoo because they understand who you are and what you're going to do. And so at the time, I was just like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, but something was like, just take a stab at it. Just listen to
Yeah.
her. Like, you know what I mean? So, and I trusted her too. You know what I mean? And I knew that she wasn't telling me anything to hurt me or to harm me, but really to catapult me forward. And so I sat with it and I was like, okay, and so as I sat with it, as I talked to people, as I used my resources in my community once again, I came to OSID. And we've gone through a few iterations of like the brand and things like that since 2022. But we're finally moving into a space where we're really defining who we are in the community. Um, but getting started in the first place was complicated in the sense that I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do and what impact I wanted to have, what that
Mm,
voice looked like, how to differentiate myself. And my
right.
my story is a bit more unique just in the sense that because of the advocacy work that I did and because of the relationship building that I did, there were pharmaceutical companies and sponsors that I was able to build relationships with almost immediately after. Um, but it was interesting because at that time I was working with a gentleman, and he was a fundraiser, and
Mm,
we didn't align, right? For
mhm.
many different reasons. But at that time, when I made my decision to cut ties, I was like, what am I going to do, God? I was like, I don't have anybody but this one pharmaceutical company. And in this year, I need another pharmaceutical company so it doesn't look like they're the only one sponsoring us. There was all these different things. So it
Mm,
went from me wanting to impact the community to me figuring out how to run a business. And it was just like, I
right.
was almost getting lost in the sauce a little bit because I'm just like, this is a lot. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think once again, when God has a hand on your life, you don't really need to figure out everything. Sometimes you just really need to show up. It's like you don't have to work towards everything. It depends on who you are,
Right.
what you have access to. So, asterisks. But I definitely think in my particular case, it was like God was like, you don't need to worry about that. I need you to show up in the spaces you need to show up. And
Mm,
so some of the relationships I was building over that year, I secured another pharmaceutical company. It was like 6 months later, but they
mm.
were somebody that I had been building a relationship with. And then after that, two more came. And it was just
Oh.
like, it was like God was like, I didn't need you to figure that aspect out. It's like, and I
Right.
told you that. you know? So it's more sometimes it's getting out of our own way, getting out of God's way. And I know that sometimes
Mhm.
people, they'll bring the spiritual aspect into it, and some people don't believe in that stuff, which is fine. Um, but I just think that sometimes if you want to take the spiritual stuff out of it, you need to get out your own way and you need to do
Right.
what you are called to do and what you feel in your heart. Like, for example, right now, I feel like God has been telling me to do YouTube and take the Instagram and stuff more seriously, and I have not been listening. So, there are
Mm.
certain things that I know that I need to do that I know I'll be able to like access more things. But listen to those voices, listen to those inclinations from yourself. Listen to your desires because they're telling you something and they mean something.
Exactly. And also trusting yourself. Like when you create a business, it's so much self work that you go through because
Yeah,
you have no choice. You got to like not take anything seriously or
yeah,
personally. Everything's your fault if it happens.
yeah,
That's negative, good or bad.
yeah.
And it's just like a character build that you go through as you're building a company.
It is.
Um, you mentioned, at first having one pharmaceutical company. What has been, but then now you have multiple, right?
Yeah,
What has been some of the research pieces that you're trying to just kind of showcase for HS as for advocacy for
yeah.
just kind of like helping people or helping patients kind of live better lives?
Yeah. What sets us apart is we do education and awareness and advocacy, right? But we're focusing
Hmm.
on the health equity lens, really looking at people as individuals and
Hmm.
not just a community who, you give one resource to and you're like, oh, you're good. It's like,
Hmm.
no, like,
Hmm.
people are experiencing this not just from the patient perspective or someone living with the disease, because everybody who has a condition is not a patient. Have been learning that over the last few years. Um,
Hmm.
really understanding what are the nuances of their particular situation. Are they
Hmm.
experiencing issues in their relationship due to HS? How do you
Hmm.
address that? Are they experiencing issues in the workplace due to their HS? How do you address that? It's just really going in on this personalized level and really saying, how can we help you to fix these particular things, right? And then the larger umbrella work, like we're working on a health equity program in conjunction with a pharmaceutical company right now, which is amazing. But the other stuff we're doing is like the documentary, really honing in on these marginalized communities who have been historically overshadowed in the medical community in general. But then when you talk about HS, that's already a marginalized community. And then you just think about how marginalized the marginalized communities in that marginalized community are. It's like,
Right.
it's a lot. It's like,
Yeah.
even the access is almost non-existent, for some folks. And
Mm.
so OSID is really looking at this from an equitable lens. What health equity? How can we really um, help people to get the care that they need that's specific to them? So we want people to really be seen for who they are and not just for what they have. Because when you're seen for who you
Mm.
are looked at as an individual living a holistic experience rather than
Right.
someone living with a disease, which is not true. It's not just that.
I love that.
Mhm.
I love that. Ooh, because when it comes to just living your life, right? Especially with having a business, what would be some tips that you would give anyone with any chronic illness or with HS listening to kind of like navigate holistically their lives
Yeah.
while building their businesses?
Yeah. One of the things that I will always advocate for is therapy. Therapy has saved my
Mm,
life. It has
mhm.
saved my life. A good therapist has saved my life. Let me put that on there.
Right.
Not just
Asterisk.
any old therapy. If you just never mind. If you just just go out there, then you're liable to get anything. But a good therapist, it takes time to find. But when you find one, and if you can find multiple, because I've had several different
Mm,
iterations of therapists. Like I have one now. Now that I moved back to Michigan, because I was living in Los Angeles for 7 years, and I just moved back at the end of February, so I had to find another therapist. But I found
yeah,
another one that was amazing, and so I used resources like Therapy for Black Girls,
love.
and love them down. You know
Okay.
what I mean? If y'all ever want to work together, let me know. Um, but love them down, because they really helped me to get connected to every therapist that I've had since I've been from California back here. And so
Mm,
therapy has really helped me to deal with a lot of the issues that I have with my self-esteem, with my body, with my condition. And has helped me to show up differently in these spaces. And then also, I'm a huge, when I talk about being spiritual, I have spiritual practices. So I deepen my spiritual practice,
mm,
because I think God has a very huge hand in a lot of who I am and what I've been able to do. And so that's a huge pillar for me. So therapy,
mm,
spiritualism, and then also somatic work and somatic healing has been
mm.
pivotal, because talk therapy doesn't always work.
Right.
It sometimes it's surface level. So it's like it might get to like 3 layers. Like, but
Mhm.
when you think about even the Earth's soil, like there's like the crust, there's like so many different layers. So it's like you have to
Right.
get down to the core of what the issue is.
Right,
And
right.
I feel like somatic healing is like that tool to get to the core of what you're dealing with. So
Mm,
somatic
mhm,
healing is like Reiki healing. It's like
mhm,
water-based healing. Sometimes it deals with different energy healings, like uh, what's the tapping method? There's like this,
mhm, mhm.
I forget what it's called. Excuse me,
I think
but
I think it is called tapping though, but
yeah,
I might be wrong.
it has like it has a specific name. I think it's called, yeah, the tapping method. Things like that help you to recalibrate your nervous system after you're dealing with
Mm,
such debilitating traumas, medical trauma, and things of that nature. And then
mhm,
another thing that has helped me is decolonizing the way that I'm looking at success. That's something new for me. Very, very
mm.
new. Because
Yeah.
the way that we look at success in America is toxic. It's very
Yep.
toxic. And
Yes.
it's also for able-bodied white men, white straight men. Okay.
Mm,
So
yes, yes,
when
yes.
you think about the way that you approach success and business, it's very much tailored to a certain type of person. And when you start to
Mm,
realize that and realize that it doesn't work for you, you start to find systems that do work for you. And so when I realized, okay, this whole like, business bro type of idea, get up at 6 a.m., go to the gym, go eat dinner. It's like, yo, I don't like the
right,
morning. I'm not getting up at 6 a.m. I'm just not gonna do that. Like, but
right.
just because I don't get up at 6 a.m. doesn't mean that I'm not successful. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
it's
mhm.
really looking at new ways of tapping into your own success. It's like it doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Yes, you can use people as motivation.
Right.
One of my favorite Bible scriptures talks about taking the wheat and leaving the chaff. I use that for every single thing in my
Mhm,
life. You don't
mhm.
need to take the whole wheat plant because you don't
Right,
utilize it all, but
right,
you
right.
you take what resonates and you leave the rest. That's a principle
Yes.
that I really feel like everyone should adopt, because then you stop being offended by so much. And then
Mhm,
you also just move on with, the things that can carry you. And so I've done that a lot, and I'm still working on it, because there are times where I'm like, oh, I'm doing all these other things, and people are like, oh, you do so much. You're always traveling. You're always doing this, that, and the third. And I'm sitting here like, I'm not doing enough, because I'm looking at other
Mhm.
people and what they have. And comparison is definitely the thief of joy.
Mhm.
So when I have started to decolonize the way that I think about success, and then also not looking at what other people are doing as if I'm not doing enough, then I've been able to really support myself as I'm building my business. And I'm still learning. There's things that I'm going to continue to learn, but those pillars have been game changers.
I love it. And
Yes.
that fits into the season, right? Of like defining your own wealth, right? Defining what it means, like you said, to be successful and
Yeah.
what really works for you, you know,
Mhm.
and seeing you as a whole person versus just like what people think or how you think someone thinks of you,
Right.
trying to overanalyze it.
Yeah.
Um, and talk to me about your Reclaim Summit. I
Yes.
know you, yeah. Talk to me about Reclaim Summit.
Yes, the I Reclaim Summit was something that was built through myself, volunteers, and then also my amazing creative team, SA Creative Playscape. Shannon and Anjana, very amazing people who are just creative geniuses. They're like your creative fairy godmothers, fairy god people. Okay, fairy god people. They are phenomenal. They're the brains behind that brand, behind a lot of what you see online for our summit. And the I Reclaim Summit is really about reclaiming our bodies, our times, and our experiences with this condition, and not just HS, but other
Mm.
inflammatory conditions like diabetes, heart disease, psoriasis. These conditions that are often found with HS, but are not necessarily like associated. And so when I thought about I Reclaim, I really wanted to create a experience, because I had been to a lot of conferences in our communities in dermatology, and a lot of them are, God bless them, very sterile, very much science heavy. And I was
Here.
just like, I am here, and I appreciate y'all for inviting me, and I want to continue to come, but I also want to I also want to create my own space where I can really put my footprint and the color and the life that I love, the fashion, the design, all of those aspects, the shapes, um, just the experiences can come out and sing. And so we took that HS virtual summit that we started in 2020, and we kept the virtual component, but we
Mhm.
shifted it to be also inclusive of in person. So we did this year was our first in-person virtual summit, and the I Reclaim
Mm.
Summit is a result of that, and it was phenomenal. It was an amazing event, and I'm excited about next year, because we're doing even more refining as we're going. And so you know um that summit was really a space for people to come in and feel like they're at home, and to be seen, and to not have to explain to people what they're dealing with, which is something that we can often find ourselves doing. When we're dealing with a flare, people are like, a flare, what is that? And then in that community, in that space, you're not having to say all that. We're like, we know what a flare is. Girl, there's a
Mhm.
kid in the bathroom. Do you need some help? Like, it's that type of environment. And then,
Mm.
you get education from vetted physicians, from specialists who know what they're talking about, who are disseminating the proper information, who care deeply about the community. And then you also have talks from influencers and people who are telling their stories, who are providing hope, who are living with this condition, are still dealing with the struggles and difficulties, but have positioned themselves now as influencers online, educators, and advocates. And so we really created this experience where people can get a lot of different things, but leave whole, leave better than what they came, and leave with a sense of community and connection that they might not have had.
That is so beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
I saw your website. It's so gorgeous
Thank
and
you.
colorful. I love it. So when you mentioned your creative team, I'm like, yes, yes, branding on point. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
I love it. Um, Overall, how do you think having HS or experiencing HS has shaped you as a person?
Mm, I love that question because it has done a lot. Um,
Mm,
it's broken me, but it's
mm,
built me back up. That's
mm,
for sure. I liken it to, and this is a little sneak peek too, of the themes that we're using for the documentary. But I liken it to the process of kintsugi. You
mm,
often have like my body, I think of as like that porcelain bowl, you know? And
mm,
kintsugi is this process for those who don't know. Let me backtrack real quick. Kintsugi is this Japanese pottery repair technique that was used to take prized pottery, porcelain, whatever, and rather than discard it to form it back together into this new art. You know what I mean? With urushi lacquer and gold dust. And so when I think about the experience with HS, I think of our bodies being that porcelain bowl that's been broken by
mm,
HS. And so over time, as we are experiencing this condition, as we're getting connected to resources, we're assessing these pieces, trying to figure out, what happened? What do I do with this? Then we find this glue, this lacquer that pieces us
mm,
back together so that we can have some type of life again, quality of life again. And then
mm,
we have this gold lining, which is us. It could be telling your story, starting a business, being an advocate, you know what I mean? Telling a family member, helping someone out, whatever it is, you know what I mean? And so I feel like my journey with HS has been like that. It's been
mm,
like the kintsugi method. I've really been transformed, and my body is no longer what it used to be, and it won't ever
mm,
be, unfortunately. But I have a new story. I'm an art piece now that I can tell people about. And people ask questions. They're like, what have you been through? And when they hear
mm,
it, I can see that it transforms people. I've been told that it transforms people. And that means a lot to me because to come from a place where I felt like I wanted to end it all to being a source
mm,
of inspiration is absolutely powerful. And I wish that for everyone. And it doesn't have to be in the way that I'm doing it, but I wish it for everyone because I think healing is accessible to anyone. And if I was deep down in the gutter where I was,
mm,
then I know
mm,
that healing exists for other people. So if
mm,
HS has taught me anything, it's taught me that I'm resilient, I can heal through anything, and that I am capable of absolutely anything that I put my mind to, and including starting a business.
mm. Oh, I'm speechless because when you were describing that process, it gave me chills. Like I literally felt
Mhm.
chills as you was describing it because it's
Yeah.
like I can tangibly feel like the concept and imagining it and like how it transfers on to helping someone rebuild themselves
Yeah.
because when we see things shattered it's like we feel it's a lost cause but it's like no absolutely not you
Mhm.
could remake yourself
Yeah.
whole and beautiful even if you're changing right that's the beautiful part of it in the
Yeah.
journey so thank you for sharing.
Of course. Of
Much.
course.
Oh my goodness. So, what's next for you? You mentioned the
Mhm.
the new documentary, the summit for next year. Those are big things. Those are big things.
Yes.
Anything else you want to share of like what's next for you and your nonprofit?
Yes. Um, so much. We're looking to create more strategic partnerships with bigger
Mm,
brands, So when you're thinking about like your Dove, your L'Oreal, P&G. You know, these larger brands where we could spread more awareness with HS. We're really looking to partner with more advocates in the community so that they can learn about how to be advocates and learn more about HS and have the tools to do things like lobbying because we can't, as a
mm,
501c3, lobby to the extent that sometimes we need.
right.
But we can encourage other individuals and train up our community to be able to do that. So we're working on doing that. We are also in development of a podcast, and really a podcast that's not looking at just HS, but really
Right.
looking at what it's like living with a chronic illness, and the different nuances
Mm,
that we experience. So really reiterating once again that motto of being seen for who you are, not just what you have. So it's like, okay, we talk about HS and how it affects you and impacts you, but how does it impact you being a mom? Or how does it impact you being
Mhm.
a lover? Does it impact you wanting to get pregnant or wanting to,
Mm,
explore your sexuality, wearing clothes, being creative, all these different things. So, the summit, the documentary, the podcast, the ambassador program that we're building. And then we're continuing to do DEI work, and health equity work, and really making sure that our community, especially marginalized communities, are getting tools and we're changing the system. So we're not doing
mm,
blanket we're not doing band-aid approaches. We're trying to change the system so that we're not having to keep doing the same thing over and over again, exhausting resources when we could do it one good time and be done with
mhm.
it. So that's the goal. But we have a whole um we're refreshing OSED, so you'll see a lot of new things from us in the next coming months, from a refresh of the website, a refresh of the brands, and just really continuing to do a lot of the on the ground work that we've been doing, and just expanding who we reach, partner with, and talk to. So yeah.
Oh. I'm smiling ear to ear because like everything that you mentioned seems so very exciting.
Thank you.
And I remember you told me a little while ago, God telling you to get online, get these content out. So that's gonna, put that into place.
Yes, yes, yes. I've been feeling the nudge. I'm like, you need to do it. Just do it. Just do
Right.
it. Yeah.
I am so excited for you. Oh
Thank
my
you.
goodness.
Thank you.
Final question.
Yes.
What is your idea of harmonious wealth?
Harmonious wealth. That's a good question. Harmonious wealth to me is at the baseline financial literacy. Really
Mhm.
understanding like the basics of financial literacy, but also understanding too that wealth doesn't only have to do with finances either. Wealth is
Mhm.
about community, and I think it's going to be more about community moving forward. A
Of
lot of the
course.
systems that we have, you can see it in the news, so this isn't conspiracy theory, are changing, and they're going to continue to change and evolve. And if we don't adopt to them, then they're going to leave us behind, And I would hate to see that for a lot of folks. So I think that really building communities, really emphasizing having community that you can lean on is a part of harmonious wealth.
Mhm.
Building wealth in the sense of like land, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
investments, and also positioning yourself to be a change maker in some regard. It doesn't have to once again look like anyone else. You don't have to be the Beyonce of your community. You know what I mean? You don't have to do that type of stuff, but you can find some way to be a change maker um, and really create like lasting change. So I think to sum it up, harmonious wealth to me is lasting, meticulous, impactful change.
I love that. Ooh, I love asking these questions.
Yes.
So, Jasmine, where can we find you?
Yes. So I am on Instagram. If you want to follow me and my journey specifically, it's at Who is Ivana. So that's IVANNA on Instagram. It's Who is Ivana Espy. So Who is IVANNA ESPY on TikTok. And then you could also find me on Facebook at Ivana Espy. And then if you want to follow my nonprofit, we are also on all platforms from TikTok to Twitter to YouTube to Instagram. And that's THEAHSID. And then you can also go to THEAHSID.org. And you can find out more information about our organization and then also the resources that we are offering the HS community, whether you want to volunteer, look into being an ambassador, or sponsor us.
Yes, that part, okay? I love it. We'll also put everything that you mentioned in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
So that is beautiful. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And
Yes.
what's so funny, because I was calling you Ivana, right? Ivana.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, we have similar names. Yes, vibe.
Yes. So I was gonna say that in the beginning. I was like, Iyanna and Ivana, okay, we're doing the thing. We're doing it. Okay. I love it.
Too funny. That's your middle name?
Yes, it is. And I use it as my
Mhm.
artist name because people ask me all the time. They're like, is it Jasmine or Ivana? I'm like, it's both. Like, you can say both.
Okay.
I answer to both of them.
Exactly.
But like, for an example, like the document I'm putting out is going to have Ivana on it. But, when I sign my contracts, Jasmine.
Jasmine.
So, it's the legal name, okay? You got to get that money.
I love it.
Yes.
Too funny.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. I love this platform, and I'm gonna do some binge listening to
Yeah.
your podcast because I'm like, I gotta see what other people are talking about.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. Catch you next time on Harmonious Wealth.